I sat in the cold silence of the bank's private office, my pen hovering over a transfer form for $520,000. It was every cent I had saved in 40 years. All for my son. Then my phone buzzed. I expected gratitude, but the screen lit up with a command that stopped my heart. Don't come tonight. My wife doesn't want you there. The pen slipped from my shaking fingers. My name is Evelyn Hart. I am 58 years old. A woman who has spent the last decade surrounded by quiet spools of yarn and the smell of ceramic glaze in my small shop, Copper Sparrow Crafts, here in Denver. But today, the comforting scent of dried clay was replaced by the sterile, intimidating smell of money and lemon floor polish inside the VIP suite of Rocky Summit Trust. I sat stiffly in a leather chair that likely cost more than my first car, my hands resting on a heavy manila folder that contained the sum of my entire existence. Inside that folder lay the paperwork to transfer $520,000. It was not just numbers on a page. It was the life insurance payout from the truck accident that took my husband 20 years ago. It was every penny I had scraped together teaching accounting at the community college, saving cents on groceries and wearing coats until the elbows wore through. It was 40 years of sacrifice distilled into a single wire transfer to help my son, Michael, buy a luxury home in the Cherry Creek neighborhood. I looked at the pen in my hand. It felt impossibly heavy. Since the day the highway patrol knocked on my door to tell me I was a widow, Michael had been my only orbit. I had been a single mother, a shield, and a bank. I had folded my own dreams into small, tight squares and tucked them away in the back of a drawer so his could expand and fill the room. Now, he was a sales director at a major tech firm, a man who wore Italian suits I could not pronounce the names of. He had married Sabrina Cole, a woman whose interior design firm, Cole and Crest Interiors, was as sharp and cold as the marble countertops she loved. To them, I was the mother who tried too hard, the woman who laughed a little too loud, the relic from a working-class life they were trying desperately to renovate over. Travis, the young banker with a tie that looked slightly too tight for his neck, slid the final authorization form across the mahogany desk. Just right there on the line. Ms. Hart, Travis said, offering a practiced, professional smile. And Michael will have the funds by this afternoon. It is a very generous gift. The phone in my purse buzzed against my hip. It was a sharp, demanding vibration. I pulled it out, expecting a thank you, or perhaps a confirmation about the time for Sabrina's birthday dinner tomorrow night. I adjusted my reading glasses, my fingers feeling cold despite the regulated heat of the office. The screen was bright, hurting my tired eyes. It was a text from Michael. I read the words, Mom, about Sabrina's birthday dinner at Harbour and Hearth tomorrow night. Don't come. She doesn't want you there. You make people uncomfortable. Best not to show up. The world did not shatter. It simply stopped. The hum of the bank's ventilation system seemed to vanish. The light filtering through the blinds turned a dull grey. My heart, usually a steady drummer, skipped a beat and then slowed to a painful, heavy thud. I stared at the screen. The letters seemed to swim in a pool of oil. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, waiting for the rest of the message. I waited for a smiley face. I waited for an apology. I waited for anything that would soften the blow. There was nothing. Just the dry, white command on the grey background. It was not a request. It was an eviction notice from his life. Ms. Hart, Travis asked, his voice sounding like it was coming from the other end of a long tunnel. Is everything all right? I could not breathe. My lungs felt like they were filled with wet concrete. I looked at the paper in front of me. The wire transfer. $520,000. The ink on the form seemed to mock me. I looked back at the phone. You make people uncomfortable. The irony tasted like copper in my mouth. I was sitting here, ready to sign away my safety net, ready to empty my accounts to ensure they could have their wine cellar and their heated floors. I was good enough to finance their facade, but I was too embarrassing to be seen eating inside it. My hand started to tremble. I clamped it down hard on the table, pressing my palm into the cold wood to stop the shaking before Travis could see. The pain in my chest was not a heart attack. It was the sensation of a cord being cut, a tether that I had held onto for 3 decades, snapping back and whipping me across the face. I looked at the signature line where my name was supposed to go. If even on the day Sabrina wanted to show off her class to her friends, I was nothing more than a shameful shadow to be hidden away. Then why was my money elegant enough to have its name on their property deed, Travis? Give me a moment. Would you? I said, pushing my chair back. My voice remained steady, polite, the voice of a woman who had spent 40 years teaching students how to balance ledgers, but my eyes felt hot and dry. I stood up and walked into the small private consultation room adjacent to the main office, closing the heavy glass door behind me. The silence inside was thick, like the air before a tornado touches down. I dialed Michael. The ringtone purred twice before he picked up. "Mom?" he answered, his tone breezy, as if he had not just text messaged a knife into my back. "You sent the text," I asked, keeping my voice low. Look, I just want everything to be perfect tomorrow night," Michael replied, letting out a small sigh that crackled through the speaker. "It is a big night for Sabrina, a lot of potential clients, and I would ruin that I asked." "It isn't that you would ruin it on purpose," Michael said, his voice dropping to that patronizing register he used when explaining technology to me. "Sabrina is just worried that, well, you might not mesh with this crowd. These are high net worth individuals. Mum, we are talking about people who own islands. Sabrina thinks you might feel out of place. You are a bit too simple for that atmosphere, and she doesn't want you to feel awkward." Simple. The word hung in the air. "I worked 3 jobs to pay for your tuition at Stanford." "Michael," I said, the memory of scrubbing diner floors at 2 a.m. flashing before my eyes. I did not feel simple then. "Mom, please, do not start with the martyr act," he said, his patience snapping like a dry twig. "Of course I am grateful. But this is business. It is about image. You just have a different vibe. Just stay home. Order takeout. We will stop by on Sunday or something. Suddenly, the last few years replayed in my mind like a film reel spinning out of control. The time he told me the reservation at the steakhouse was lost, only for me to see photos of them eating there on social media later. The time he asked me to change my dress before his company picnic because it looked too thrift store. I had ignored the signs. I had painted over the cracks with excuses because I wanted to believe my son was still the boy who used to cling to my leg during thunderstorms. "Fine," I said, my voice terrifyingly soft. "You rest easy. Michael, I will not make anyone uncomfortable, including this bank." I thought, "Thanks. Mom? I knew you would understand. Love you," he said, and the line went dead. I stared at the phone, then looked up into the small vanity mirror on the wall. I saw a woman with grey hair pulled back in a sensible bun, wearing a coat that was 5 years old but clean. I saw tired eyes surrounded by wrinkles etched by worry and overwork. For the first time, I asked myself the question I should have asked a decade ago. What am I to him besides a checkbook that breathes? I straightened my spine. The fatigue that had weighed on me for years seemed to evaporate, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I walked back out to the desk. Travis was clicking a pen, waiting for me to sign the final authorization. I changed my mind, I said. Travis blinked, his hand freezing in midair. "Excuse me, cancel the transaction," I said. "Cancel the entire thing. I am not transferring the money. Ms. Hart, the paperwork is already printed." Travis stammered, looking confused. Is there an issue with the amount? We can adjust the no adjustment." I cut him off, my voice ringing with a strength I had not felt since I buried my husband. "I just realized I need to review my finances. I need to make sure I am using my money for the right people. And right now, I am not sure I have found any." I gathered my purse and stood up. I left the papers unsigned on the desk. $520,000 staying exactly where it belonged under my name. Walking out of the bank and into the Denver sunlight, I felt strange. I felt empty. Yes, but also light. As if an invisible noose around my neck had finally been loosened. I took a deep breath of the cool mountain air. I did not know it then. But by refusing to sign that paper, I had not just saved my savings. I had unknowingly stepped on a tripwire that was about to detonate a secret far larger than a missed birthday dinner. I drove my 10-year-old sedan through the sun-drenched streets of Denver, but the warmth could not penetrate the windshield. The rejection from Michael was not a sudden storm. As the miles rolled by, I began to see it was merely the final thunderclap in a long, slow season of rain I had chosen to ignore. My mind drifted back to Christmas last year. I remembered standing in the foyer of their rented penthouse, my arms aching under the weight of a glazed ham and 3 heavy casserole dishes I had spent 2 days preparing. The smell of clove and roasted pineapple, a scent that used to make Michael run to the kitchen as a boy, seemed to offend the filtered air of their apartment. Sabrina had walked out of the kitchen, holding a glass of champagne, and stopped dead. "Oh." "Mom," she had said, her voice dripping with a pity that felt like ice water. "We ordered catering from the Gilded Fork. We have truffles and Wagyu sliders. Your food is a bit redundant now. Maybe we can leave it in the pantry." Redundant. That was the word she used for my love. Then there was the dinner at the French bistro 3 months ago. I remembered picking up the wrong fork for the appetizer. Sabrina had reached out, touched my hand with a smile that did not reach her eyes, and whispered loud enough for the waiter to hear. "I only worry you might struggle with the etiquette here. Evelyn, next time we will pick somewhere friendlier to your habits. Somewhere with paper napkins." Perhaps I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Why had I laughed then? Why had I apologized? I realized with a sick, sinking feeling that I had trained Michael to treat me this way. When his father died, I made a vow to fill the void. I shielded him from every consequence. I gave him the best cuts of meat while I ate the gristle. I taught him that he was the sun, and I was merely the gravity that held him up. I had raised a prince who now looked at his builder and saw a peasant. The most stinging memory, however, was not about food or manners. It was about my competence. I remembered a moment last month at my shop, Copper Sparrow Crafts. I was in the back room, and Michael was out front waiting for me, chatting with one of my suppliers. Mum is sweet, but she is hopeless with finances, I heard Michael say, his voice smooth and confident. I handle all the heavy lifting. I put my name on the accounts to help her. You know how confused she gets with numbers? I am a woman who taught accounting at a community college for 30 years. I can spot a rounding error from across the room, yet, standing there in the back room, I had said nothing. I had let him play the hero. Now. The memory chilled me. How many times in the last few years had Michael slid a document across my kitchen table? Just sign here, Mom, he would say, tapping the paper with his fingernail. I already checked it. It is just boring bank updates. Save your eyes. And I had signed. I had signed because I trusted him. I had signed because I wanted to be the easy mother, the supportive mother, not the nagging accountant. A wave of nausea hit me. Had I handed him the keys to my vault along with my dignity that night? I could not sit alone in my quiet house. I walked across the lawn to the small bungalow next door. Joan Miller, my best friend and the owner of Dust and Dawn Books, opened the door wearing an oversized cardigan and holding a mug of herbal tea. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside. We sat at her kitchen table under the warm glow of a stained glass lamp. For the first time, I told her everything. I told her about the text message. I told her about the cancelled wire transfer. I told her about the snide comments and the slow erasure of my presence from their lives. Joan listened without interrupting, her sharp eyes studying me over the rim of her mug. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavy. "You think you failed him?" Joan said, her voice raspy and direct. "I raised him to be this way," I whispered, staring into my black coffee. "I made him think he deserves everything without earning it." Joan set her mug down with a definitive clack. "Evelyn, listen to me," she said, leaning forward. "You are not a bad mother, but you are feeding a monster and calling it love. You are not raising a son anymore. You are funding a disease. He is a 40-year-old man who treats his mother like a disposable wallet. And you—" She paused, reaching out to cover my trembling hand with hers. "You have a rare opportunity to stop the infection before it kills you. You kept the money today. That is the first step. But looking at you, I think you know it cannot be the last." 3 days after I walked out of the bank, my phone rang. It was not Michael apologizing, nor was it Sabrina offering a belated invitation. It was a woman named Nora from the Fraud and Security Department at Rocky Summit Trust. She did not use the syrupy customer service voice that Travis used. Her tone was flat, urgent, and terrifyingly professional. She asked me to come in immediately regarding some irregularities that had surfaced during a routine post-cancellation audit. I sat in a different room this time. This was not the plush VIP suite with the lemon scent. This room was smaller, colder, and smelled of stale coffee and photocopier ink. Nora sat across from me, her hands clasped on top of a thick stack of spreadsheets. She was a sharp-featured woman who looked like she did not deal in grey areas, only black and white. Mrs. Hart. "When you cancelled that large transfer the other day, our system flagged your account for a manual review," Nora said, sliding a sheet of paper toward me. "We noticed a pattern. It was subtle enough to bypass the daily algorithms because the amounts were always just under the reporting threshold. But over a period of 6 years, the volume is significant. I looked at the paper. It was a list of transfers, occurring almost monthly. $2,200, $2,500, occasionally $3,000. They were all sent to a business account labeled Cole Concept Studio LLC. My stomach turned over. Cole Concept Studio was the name of Sabrina's company before she rebranded it to the more pretentious Cole and Crest Interiors. Mrs. Hart. Nora asked. Her eyes locked on mine. Did you authorize these transfers as an ongoing investment? I wanted to say yes. My instinct was to cover for them, to pretend I was just a forgetful old woman. But then I looked at the signature on the authorized withdrawal slip Nora placed next to the list. It was my name. It was my handwriting. But it was not my hand. Look at the loop on the E, Nora said, pointing with a pen. And the tail on the T. We had a handwriting analyst look at this morning. Whoever signed this has practiced your signature extensively. It is a very high-quality forgery, likely done by someone with access to your old checks and legal documents. But they missed the small pressure point you always put at the end of your last name. I stared at the ink. It was a violation so intimate it made me nauseous. I realized why I had spent the last 6 years feeling like I was drowning. I had taken extra shifts teaching night classes. I had sold my grandmother's jewelry. I had cut coupons until my fingers were stained with newsprint. I had done all of that because I thought I was just bad at managing my retirement funds. I thought inflation was eating me alive. The truth was far simpler. My family was eating me alive. The total amount over 6 years, Nora said, her voice dropping an octave, is just over $150,000. The room spun. $150,000. That was not just money. That was my time. That was the vacation to Italy I never took. That was the new roof I did not buy. That was my life. Siphoned off drop by drop to fund Sabrina's office renovations and Michael's designer suits. This constitutes felony fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. Nora continued, opening a folder on her laptop. But there is one more thing you need to see. She turned the screen toward me. It was a grainy, still image from a security camera, dated 5 years ago. It showed the teller counter. Standing there, looking handsome and confident in his university hoodie, was Michael. He was handing a slip to the teller, smiling that charming smile that used to melt my heart. He was listed as an authorized courier on your account for a brief period after your husband died. Nora explained. He used that clearance to set up the initial standing order, and he has been renewing it with these forged slips ever since. I looked at the face of my son. He looked so happy stealing from me. Nora closed the laptop and folded her hands. Mrs. Hart. We are required to file a police report for a theft of this magnitude. However, given the identity of the suspect, we need your direct input. If we proceed, he will be arrested. Do you want to push this to the full extent of the law, even if it is your son? I looked at the frozen image of Michael one last time. The anger that had been burning hot since the text message suddenly cooled into something solid and heavy, like a stone in my chest. I need to think, I whispered, though my mind was already racing toward a different kind of justice. Give me a moment to breathe. I drove home through a torrential downpour, the rain hammering against the windshield like 1,000 tiny accusations. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the water, just as I had fought a losing battle against the truth for the last decade. Thoughts of Michael and Sabrina swirled in my mind, blurry and unavoidable like the headlights of oncoming traffic. I gripped the steering wheel until my hands ached. In my mind, I played out the scene. I would kick open the door to their immaculate apartment, their sanctuary of beige linen and polished glass. I would throw the stack of fraudulent bank statements onto their coffee table and scream, "What have you done to me?" But the fantasy dissolved as quickly as it formed. I knew exactly what would happen. Sabrina would widen her eyes, feigning a terrifying innocence, perhaps even shedding a single, perfect tear. Michael would put on his reasonable voice, the one he used to close sales deals. He would say it was a misunderstanding, a temporary loan, a complicated financial maneuver I simply did not understand because I was just a mother, not a businessman. They would make me feel crazy. They would make me apologize for catching them stealing my life. I did not go home. Instead, I turned the car toward Joan's house. 20 minutes later, my kitchen table was forgotten. We were at Joan's, the surface of her oak dining table buried under a blizzard of paper. The room smelled of old books and strong, black coffee. The single overhead light cast long, harsh shadows, turning her cozy dining room into a makeshift interrogation cell. Joan Miller, a woman who had survived a divorce from a gambler who tried to leverage their house for poker chips, picked up a bank statement. She adjusted her reading glasses and let out a dry, humorless laugh. "This is not a mistake. Evelyn," she said, her voice raspy with cigarette smoke and cynicism. "This is not Michael accidentally using the wrong card to buy gas. This is organized theft. It is methodical. 6 years? Evelyn? 6 years?" She tossed the paper down. "He has been siphoning your retirement to build his empire." Joan continued. "Most kids steal a 20 from their mother's purse. Your kid stole the purse, the bank account, and the leather factory that made the purse." I sat there, torn in half. Part of me was the mother who remembered rocking to sleep when he had a fever. That part wanted to bury the papers in the backyard and pretend none of this happened. But the other part of me, the part that was currently staring at a future of poverty, felt a cold, hard rage. All my justifications that I did everything for family suddenly sounded like cheap lies I told myself to sleep at night. I was not a matriarch. I was a host organism. Joan took a sip of her coffee and looked me dead in the eye. "Here is the question you have to answer right now," she said. "Do you want to revenge him, punish him, or save him? Because those are 3 different roads, and you can only drive down one." "If I call the police," I whispered, my voice trembling, "he goes to prison. He loses his job. He loses his reputation. I will be the mother who destroyed her own son." "And if you do nothing," Joan countered, leaning forward, "he keeps treating you like an ATM until you are eating cat food in a state facility. Is that the plan? To starve quietly, so Sabrina can have new curtains. I realized then that I did not want him in a cage. Prison would let him play the victim. He would blame the system, blame the law, blame me. I wanted something else. I did not want to take his freedom. I wanted to take his entitlement. I wanted to strip away the unearned status, the money, the false pride he wore like armor. I wanted him to stand naked before the truth of who he really was without my money propping him up. "I need a lawyer," I said, the decision forming like ice in my stomach. "But not a loud one. I do not want a scandal. I want a scalpel." Joan snapped her fingers. "Victor Hale. He comes into the bookshop. He bought that vintage silk scarf from you last Christmas for his wife. He specializes in corporate fraud and financial disputes. The man hates noise, but he loves winning. He is sharp enough to cut glass. Victor Hale. I remembered him, a man of few words and expensive suits. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but this time it was not from grief or shock. It was from adrenaline. I found the number for his firm online and dialed Hale Law. A receptionist answered. "This is Evelyn Hart," I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. "I need help. And this time, it is to protect myself, not my son." I sat in the leather chair of Victor Hale's corner office in downtown Denver, the city skyline sprawling beneath us through floor-to-ceiling glass. The room was cold, smelling of expensive cologne and old law books. For the last hour, I had laid out every jagged piece of the betrayal, the text message that banned me from dinner, the cancelled wire transfer, and the $150,000 stolen over 6 years through forged signatures. Victor listened in silence. He was a man who seemed carved out of granite, his eyes sharp and unreadable. He tapped a silver pen against his legal pad, the only sound in the room. "If we take this to the district attorney," Victor said, his voice level and devoid of emotion, "Michael and Sabrina are looking at felony charges, forgery, wire fraud, identity theft. Given the amount, prison time is a very real possibility." He paused, looking at me over the rim of his glasses. "But a criminal trial is a blunt instrument, Evelyn. The media loves a story about a rich son robbing his widowed mother. They will camp on your lawn. They will dig up your husband's death. You will win, but you will bleed publicly to do it. I do not want to destroy them for the public's entertainment," I said, looking at my hands. "I just want my life back. I want them to feel the weight of what they did." Victor nodded, as if he expected this. "Then we go the civil route. We use the criminal evidence as leverage, a knife on the table that only they can see. We force them to sign a settlement, full repayment, transfer of assets to cover the debt, and a strict no-contact order unless you initiate it." I thought about the years I spent blindly signing papers Michael slid across my kitchen table, the trust I had given him, pure and foolish. "I have a condition," I said, looking up. "I want them to sign it without knowing what it really is. At least, for a moment. I want them to think they are winning. I want them to sign it with the same blind arrogance they used when they stole from me." Victor raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Then a slow, shark-like smile touched his lips. "Symbolic justice," Victor mused. "I like it." He opened his laptop and began to type. "I will draft a document that looks like a family investment agreement. On the surface, it will look like the loan paperwork for the house they want. But the appendices, the parts they never read, will contain an admission of guilt, a confession of judgment, and a clause that transfers the controlling interest of their assets to you in the event of default. And since they have already defaulted by stealing $150,000, they lose everything the moment they sign." I finished. "Exactly," Victor said. "We will set the trap at Harbour and Hearth, the restaurant they banned you from. It is poetic." Victor picked up his phone and dialed Nora at the bank. He spoke in rapid, clipped sentences, convincing her to hold off on filing the official police report for 48 hours, promising a resolution that would recover the bank's funds without a messy investigation. Nora agreed. The clock was ticking. Then, Victor turned his computer screen toward me. There is one more thing you need to know, he said. I ran a preliminary credit check on Sabrina's company, Cole and Crest Interiors. They are not just looking for a house, Evelyn. They are drowning. I stared at the red numbers on the screen. Sabrina has been using your stolen money to plug holes in her operating budget, Victor explained. She has vendors threatening to sue. She is insolvent. They are desperate for cash to keep the facade alive. So my offer to help them buy the house, I whispered, is the only lifeline they have left, Victor said. They will not just walk into this trap, Evelyn. They will run into it. That evening, I stood before the full-length mirror in my hallway. I smoothed down my dress and practiced the face of a defeated mother. I slumped my shoulders slightly. I softened my eyes. I am so sorry, Michael, I said to my reflection, testing the lie. I was just emotional. I want to help. I tried again, making my voice wobble. I know I do not fit in with your friends, but I just want you to be happy. It was perfect. It was the Evelyn they expected. The doormat. The wallet. I looked at the woman in the mirror. The woman who was about to walk into a luxury restaurant and execute her own son's financial ruin. They think I am weak, I told my reflection, my voice turning cold again. Let them believe it. It will make the fall hurt so much more. It took every ounce of acting ability I possessed to dial Michael's number. My hand hovered over the call button for a long moment, trembling not from fear, but from the sheer effort of suppressing the rage that had been boiling inside me for weeks. When I finally pressed the button, I forced my breathing to slow, moulding my voice into the fragile, apologetic tone of a mother who knew her place. Mom, Michael answered, his voice guarded. Michael. I started, letting a deliberate tremor slide into my words. I am sorry. I think I reacted poorly the other day. Getting old makes me sensitive, I suppose. I was just scared of being left behind. The silence on the other end lasted only a second before the tension in his voice broke. It is okay. Mom? Michael said. The relief audible. I know you didn't mean to cause a scene. It is just... Work has been crazy. And Sabrina is under so much pressure to keep up appearances with the new house. Without that down payment locked in, she is spiraling a bit. I closed my eyes. He was already laying the groundwork to ask for the money again. I want to fix it, I said softly. Let us meet at Harbour and Hearth, just like the original plan. I will bring the paperwork. We can talk about the house. Call it a fresh start. The bait was taken. Within an hour, I received a text from Sabrina. It was polite, filled with emojis of hearts and praying hands, as if she had not been the one to banish me from her life just days ago. Greed, I realized, has a way of erasing memory. I spent the afternoon preparing for battle. I chose a dress the color of deep red wine, simple but elegant, and applied a touch of makeup to hide the sleepless nights. I finished with a spray of sandalwood perfume, the scent my late husband loved. I did not wear it for them. I wore it to remind myself that I was not the simple woman they mocked. I was Evelyn Hart, and I was done being a victim. I arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early. I met Victor at a small coffee shop across the street. He slid a silver-grey folder across the table. It looked innocuous, like standard loan paperwork. The top sheet is titled Agreement for Family Investment, Victor said, his voice low. It looks like a standard promissory note, but the appendices, The ones marked with the yellow stickers. Those contain the admission of unauthorized access to your accounts and the transfer of collateral. Once they sign those, they are confessing to a felony and handing you the keys to their kingdom. And if they actually read it, I asked. Victor tapped a small black device on the table. This is a high-fidelity voice recorder. Slip it into your purse. Even if the meeting goes south, we will have them on tape, admitting to the past transfers. And a sealed copy of the fraud evidence is already in the bank's safety deposit box. If you do not call Nora by tomorrow morning to stop it, the police report files automatically. I took the folder and the recorder. Let's go. Harbour and Hearth was dimly lit, smelling of roasted garlic and expensive ambition. I sat at a corner table and placed the silver folder directly in the centre, positioning it so the friendly title was visible. It sat there like a landmine disguised as a gift. When Michael and Sabrina arrived, they looked like a magazine cover. Michael wore a crisp navy suit, and Sabrina was draped in silk that probably cost more than my car. But up close, I saw the cracks. Michael had dark circles under his eyes, and Sabrina's smile was too tight, too practiced. Evelyn, Sabrina exclaimed, leaning in for a hug that smelled of heavy floral perfume and insincerity. I am so glad you could make it. We missed you. I missed you too. I lied, my body stiffening as she touched me. We sat down. The waiter poured water, and the tension at the table was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. I decided to let them speak first. I needed to hear their version of history one last time. Mum, about the birthday dinner. Michael started, reaching for a breadstick. We wanted to protect you. Honestly. Sabrina was worried that people would judge you for not knowing the industry talk. We didn't want you to feel left out. Exactly. Sabrina chimed in, placing a manicured hand on my arm. We know how simple you like things. Evelyn. We were just trying to save you from an awkward evening. It came from a place of love. I looked at them. They were rewriting the narrative in real time, painting their cruelty as charity. They truly believed I was foolish enough to accept this. I understand, I said, looking down at the folder. And that is why I brought this, because I want to make sure you two are supported, no matter what. Michael's eyes darted to the folder, hunger flashing across his face. He had no idea he was looking at his own execution warrant. The waiter cleared away the remnants of our roasted duck, leaving only the polished mahogany table between us. The air was thick with the scent of espresso and the lingering tension of a performance that had gone on too long. I reached into my bag and pulled out the silver-grey folder Victor had prepared. I placed it gently on the table, smoothing the cover with a hand that I forced to remain steady. I want everything to be clear this time, I said, keeping my voice soft but deliberate. This is the agreement regarding my investment. It covers the down payment for your house, and there is a clause included for additional funding for Sabrina's company, should you need it. I watched Sabrina's eyes widen. The mention of investment for the company hit her like a shot of adrenaline. I knew from Victor that she was drowning in debt, desperate for cash flow to keep her vendors from walking away. She leaned forward, her hunger for the money overriding any caution she might have had. Michael reached for the folder immediately, pulling a gold pen from his jacket pocket. He flipped open the cover, scanning the first few pages where Victor had used broad, friendly language about family support and mutual growth. It looks pretty standard. Mom, Michael said, uncapping the pen with a flourish. Just a formality for the bank. Right. I took a sip of water to moisten my dry throat. I am not very good with all these legal terms. Victor wrote it up for me. But I trust him. And I trust you. The words tasted like ash. But they worked. Michael's chest puffed out slightly at the validation. He did not bother to read the fine print. He did not flip to the appendices where the font grew smaller and the language grew sharper. Sabrina pulled the folder toward her, but she did not look at the legal definitions. Her finger traced the line where the potential commitment amount was listed. She completely ignored the paragraph directly above the signature line on page 12, the one that explicitly stated the signer acknowledged unauthorized access to the lender's accounts and agreed to transfer all intellectual property and assets of Cole and Crest Interiors in the event of a breach. Just sign where the yellow stickers are, I instructed, pointing to the colourful tabs Victor had meticulously placed. Michael signed first, his signature a quick, arrogant scrawl. Then he pushed the folder to Sabrina. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, but the promise of a bailout was too strong. She pressed the pen to the paper and signed away her company, her assets, and her future. I watched the ink dry. A strange sensation washed over me, a mix of nausea and a dark, cold thrill. For years, I had been the one signing blindly, trusting the family bond to protect me. Now, the roles were reversed. They had just signed their own confessions without even reading the page. There, Michael said, closing the folder and sliding it back to me with a smile that was almost genuine. Done. Now we can focus on the closing date. I placed my hand on the folder, securing it. Then, I reached into my bag again and pulled out a second envelope. This one was dark blue and sealed. There is one more thing, I said, my voice dropping the facade of warmth. This is the statement Nora from the bank sent me. I slid the blue envelope across the table to Michael. He looked confused, his brow furrowing. Nora, who is Nora? He tore open the seal and pulled out the stack of papers. The first page was a spreadsheet highlighting dozens of transfers. $2,200, $2,500, $3,000. Month after month, year after year. I watched the colour drain from his face as he flipped to the second page. It was the report from the handwriting expert, comparing his forged version of my signature against my real one. And then, the final blow, the grainy security photo of him standing at the teller counter, authorizing a transfer from an account he had no legal right to touch. The silence that fell over the table was deafening. The clinking of silverware from other tables seemed to fade away. Michael's hands began to shake, the papers rattling in his grip. Sabrina leaned over, glancing at the documents. She saw the total sum over $150,000 and the undeniable proof of fraud. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Evelyn," Sabrina whispered, her voice cracking into jagged pieces. This is not what you think. We were just borrowing it. We were going to pay it back. Borrowing requires permission." "Sabrina," I said, my voice steady and cold as steel. "Taking without asking is theft, and doing it for 6 years is a lifestyle." Michael looked up at me, his eyes wide with terror. "Mom, you went to the bank. Does anyone else know about this?" I leaned back in my chair, looking at the 2 people who had eaten my food, spent my savings, and then tried to hide me away like a dirty secret. "You just signed a document admitting to it?" I said, tapping the silver folder. "But that was just the first step. If you think you are walking away from this table with just an apology, You have no idea how much I have changed." I leaned forward, placing my elbows on the table. My voice was not loud. It was terrifyingly quiet, each word hitting the wood like a heavy stone. 6 years, I said. You have been draining my accounts for 6 years. Not once did you ask for permission. Not once did you call to ask if I had enough money to pay my heating bill. You just took it. Michael wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. He looked like a child caught with his hand in the jar, but his eyes held a desperate, adult panic. It was just a temporary measure, Michael stammered, his voice pitching higher. I intended to pay it all back. Mom, I swear. I just needed liquidity until Sabrina's company took off. You do not understand the pressure I am under. I have to look successful. I could not let Sabrina, or her clients, think I could not provide capital. You stole from your mother to buy respect you did not earn. I stated flatly. Sabrina, realizing the walls were closing in, turned on him. She looked at me, her eyes wide and wet with tears that seemed only half genuine. Evelyn, please, she said, her voice trembling. I knew the money was coming from you, but Michael told me you approved it. He said, Mom wants to help. She just hates the paperwork. So I handle the transfers. I thought you were being generous. I didn't know he was. Forging my name, I cut her off. I looked straight at her, watching her crumble. If I had truly agreed, Sabrina, why did he have to practice my signature? Why did neither of you ever look me in the eye over a Sunday dinner and say, "Thank you, Mom, for the money"? Sabrina opened her mouth, then closed it. The lie died in her throat. Do you know what I have been doing for the last 6 years? I asked, letting the anger bleed into my voice just enough for them to feel the heat. I have been staying up until 2 in the morning, taking freelance bookkeeping jobs. I have been selling things online. Because I looked at my statements and could not figure out why the numbers were always dropping. I blamed myself. I thought I was getting old. I thought I was losing my mind. I paused, letting the shame settle on them. I sat in my kitchen and cried because I thought I was failing. I whispered, while you two were using my money to play power couple. Michael reached across the table, trying to grab my hand. I pulled it away as if his skin were made of fire. Mom, please, he begged, his voice cracking. We can fix this. We can keep this in the family. I will sell the car. We will downsize the apartment. Just do not involve the police. Think about my career. Think about what people will say. Sabrina remained silent, but her eyes darted nervously toward the waiter bringing the check, terrified that someone might see her looking anything less than perfect. Even now, drowning in guilt, she was worried about the audience. You still do not get it, I said, straightening my back. I do not want the money back in secret. I am not interested in saving your reputation anymore. I placed my hand on the silver folder they had just signed. You are worried about the police. You should be worried about this. I tapped the cover. You didn't read the appendices, did you? I asked. You were so eager for the payout that you missed the terms. By signing this, you just formally admitted to the unauthorized use of my funds. That is a confession of guilt. Michael's face went grey. And, I continued, enjoying the dawn of horror in Sabrina's eyes. You agreed to the default clauses, since you have already taken over $150,000 without repayment. You are currently in default, according to page 12, paragraph 4. The collateral for this debt is now forfeit. What collateral? Sabrina whispered, her voice barely audible. We didn't put up the house yet. Not the house, I said. The business. You just signed over the controlling interest, intellectual property, and assets of Cole and Crest Interiors to me. Sabrina gasped, gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. And finally, I said, looking at Michael, you waived your right to any future financial support or inheritance from my estate. Any dispute regarding this contract goes to binding arbitration. And the sole designated arbitrator is Victor Hale. They sat there, frozen. The expensive food, the wine, the ambience, it all faded away. They realized they had not just walked into a dinner. They had walked into a courtroom, and they had just signed their own sentence. This is what happens when you treat a person like a resource, I said, standing up and picking up my purse. Eventually, the resource runs dry, and sometimes the mine collapses on top of you. The next morning, the reality of what they had signed hit Michael's inbox with a digital thud. Victor sent him the full PDF of the agreement, with the confession clause highlighted in bright yellow. I admit to the unauthorized access and use of funds belonging to Evelyn Hart. There was no wiggle room. There was no misunderstanding. It was a signed confession. By noon, we were sitting in Victor's office again. This time, there was no food, no wine, and no pretense of family warmth. Michael and Sabrina sat on the edge of the leather sofa, looking like they had not slept in days. They had come ready to beg, ready to negotiate a way out of the trap. But Victor did not give them the chance. He pointed to a large monitor on the wall where Nora from the bank was watching via video call, her face stern and unyielding. Legally, Victor began, his voice dry and precise. Ms. Hart has enough evidence here to trigger a criminal indictment. Between the bank's fraud report and your signed admission, the district attorney would have a field day. However, my client has chosen a different path. It is less public. But I assure you, it is far more rigorous. He slid the final addendum across the desk. Option B, Victor said. The bank will not press charges if full restitution is guaranteed. You will sign an authorization for an automatic wage garnishment from Michael's salary for the next 7 years. Every month, 30% of your gross income goes directly to Evelyn Hart until the debt, plus interest and legal fees, is paid in full. Michael slumped, burying his head in his hands. But I was not done. I turned to Sabrina, and regarding the collateral, I said, my voice steady, effective immediately. I am the majority owner of Cole and Crest Interiors. Sabrina let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. You cannot run a design firm. Evelyn, you sell yarn. You do not know the first thing about my clients or my brand. You will run it into the ground in a week. I have no intention of running it, I replied, looking her dead in the eye. I have already executed a preliminary agreement to sell the assets, the client list, and the brand name to Urban Haven Designs. Sabrina's face went white. Urban Haven was her biggest local competitor, a firm she had mocked publicly for years. You can't, she stammered. They will strip it for parts. They will erase my name. They offered a fair price, I said with a shrug. It covers the legal fees and a portion of the debt. It is just business. Sabrina. Mom, this is insane, Michael shouted, standing up, his face wet with tears. You are stripping us of everything. Our income, Sabrina's career. You are destroying our lives. How is this different from killing us? I looked at my son, the boy I had protected from every storm until he learned how to create them himself. You killed my trust a long time ago. Michael, I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the room like a blade. I am just burying it in the proper place. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. There is one final condition, I said, not turning around. If you sign this, I will not file the criminal complaint. You stay out of prison. But you cannot afford that penthouse with your garnished wages. You will move out. You will live within your means. And until the debt is paid in full, you do not contact me. No holidays, no birthdays, no fake apologies when you need cash. The silence in the room was heavy, filled only by the hum of the air conditioner and Michael's ragged breathing. He looked at the pen. He looked at Sabrina, who was staring at the floor, defeated by the terrifying math of prison versus poverty. One by one, they signed. Michael cried as he did it, not because he was sorry, but because he finally understood that the safety net was gone. He was falling, and I was not going to catch him. Sabrina signed in a cold, hateful silence, her hand shaking as she gave away her identity to save her freedom. That night, I sat on the small balcony of my home. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine from the distant Rockies. My phone pinged. It was an email from the bank confirming the garnishment order was active. A second email followed from the buyers of Sabrina's company with the subject line, "Welcome to the new agreement." I put the phone down and looked at the city lights. I did not feel a surge of joy. I did not feel the crushing weight of sadness. I felt something far more precious. I felt light. I had taken my name off the checkbook of their lives and written it back onto my own. The dinner they had banned me from had ended. But I had set a new table, one where respect was the main course. And for the first time in years, I was the one deciding who got a seat. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let's chat. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who need to hear it.